Nikola Tesla passed away on January 7th, 1943 at his hotel room at the New Yorker. And 2 days later, the FBI conducted a raid and took possession of all of his belongings, including nearly 80 trunks or 2 full truckloads of handwritten paperwork. In this video, I'm going to connect the dots on key pieces of evidence that will convince any reasonable person that not only are we looking at a real-life, genuine conspiracy, but the allegations involving a cover-up on behalf of the FBI following the events of Nikola Tesla's death is not only real, but it also involved the CIA, and I have the documentation to prove this. Now, if you're not familiar with Nikola Tesla, as most people are not, especially in the United States, as he's not even required learning in the public school system, despite the fact that 80% of all of our modern technology is based off of his inventions, works, and achievements. In fact, we're talking about the person who invented the technology to harness the AC current, which is of course utilized to power the entire electrical grid throughout the modern world. Not only that, but Tesla invented the electrical motor, which is used in so many different aspects of our lives, and here I just threw up a few photos of some ideas that I thought of, but there are many other examples. It's incredible. Tesla also invented the remote control, which he demonstrated in front of shocked crowds more than 100 years ago, and is the result of so much convenience in our daily lives that we take for granted and we don't think about too often. Another little known fact is that Tesla invented the radio, not Marconi. In fact, the Supreme Court ruled on this decades ago, but most people are not aware of this. Tesla had hundreds of patents throughout the world. In fact, inventions such as the television, computers, lasers, x-rays, robotics, and many other things can be credited at their roots based on the works and achievements that Tesla had completed. Now, Tesla had also claimed that he had perfected the technology to harness wireless free energy to the entire world. And he even began works on completing this technology, which is referred to as the Tesla Tower, until J.P. Morgan, one of the heirs to the banking conglomerates, which is a whole different story, pulled back funding and gave it to Thomas Edison, who we'll get to in just a second. But Tesla was so adamant that he had completed and perfected this ability that he wrote 50 letters over 5 years to J.P. Morgan, begging and pleading that, listen, I just need more funding, I have perfected this technology. But J.P. Morgan did not go along with it, and ultimately he demolished the site, and this is what's left of it. You know, it's interesting, many people don't believe that Tesla had perfected that technology, but why would you doubt him? I mean, you certainly believe in Wi-Fi, you believe in satellite TV or radio, which when you think about it, we're talking about energy and information coming out of thin air, and it's really incredible when you think about it. Now, Tesla is the same person who accurately and epically, I should say, described a cell phone or even the Skype and FaceTime apps, or smart TVs for that matter, back in 1926. In fact, take a second to pause the video and read this quote. But people called Tesla crazy or a mad scientist for this. They never believed it. And all of these things tie into what Tesla had stated about understanding the secrets of the universe would require to think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, which is of course what these things are. So when Nikola Tesla stated adamantly a month before his death that he had perfected the death ray, which would essentially just make planes fall out of the sky, you have to start to wonder, had he figured that out? Now, going back to Thomas Edison, most people think that he invented the light bulb, which he did not. In fact, mainstream outlets around the world are starting to report on this in just the last few years. Yet they still teach this in the public schooling system. It's ridiculous. All Edison did was buy the patent, and he had a few dozen interns perfect it, and then he stamped his name on it and made a fortune in the process. In fact, Edison was not an inventor. He hardly invented anything. In fact, he actually screwed over Nikola Tesla when he refused to pay him a promised $50,000, which would be equivalent to a few $1,000,000 today, when Nikola Tesla perfected the AC current over the DC current, which was what Thomas Edison was pushing all around the world. In fact, Thomas Edison, if you want to know what kind of person he was, he literally electrocuted dogs, horses, and elephants to try and discredit the AC current in order to prop up the DC current, saying that it was much safer, which just wasn't true whatsoever. In fact, that reminds me, do you want to know something that Edison actually did invent? The electric chair. That's right. He sold the electric chair and profited off an invention that would kill people. So you have to ask yourself, somebody who profited off electrocuting animals and people, why is it that we're being taught so many great things about him in school when the true narrative about this guy is just being kept in the dark? Now, with all of that said, let me transition into the cover-up and conspiracy. So for decades after the FBI raided Nikola Tesla's hotel room and took possession of all of his paperwork and other belongings, they claimed that they immediately handed over to the Office of Alien Property Custodian, which was odd, by the way, because Nikola Tesla had already been a U.S. citizen for more than 50 years. But ultimately, this was in the heart of World War II, and they wanted to make sure that there was nothing within his possession that could be, well, the information could be utilized by the enemy. But what's odd is that the government actually held on to all of his possessions for 9 years. Not until 1952 is when they finally released all of his possessions and paperwork back over to his family overseas in Belgrade. So in 2013, the FBI was required to release documentation on Nikola Tesla following a request filed through the Freedom of Information Act. And you can actually see these documents online through the FBI's website. But these declassified documents caught the FBI red-handed in multiple lies. In fact, the FBI was interviewed in 2008 by Wired.com in order to discuss the 10 greatest myths ever about the FBI. And number 10 was, get this, about them having Nikola Tesla's plans for a death ray. Let me read to you, and I quote, "Despite long-standing reports and rumors, the FBI was not involved in searching Tesla's effects, and it never had possession of his papers or any microfilm that may have been made of those papers. Since 1943, we have told a consistent story to all who have asked. Reports to the contrary appear to be based on an initial confusion of FBI agents with other government officials, especially Alien Property Office personnel. These rumors have been repeated in biographies and articles on Tesla without double-checking the facts as reported in our files. But when these files were declassified 5 years later, well, it caught them in more than one lie." Now, before I show you those documents, there's one really important aspect of this case, and it's really odd. So, Professor John G. Trump, who worked at MIT, was the person chosen to review all of Tesla's documents, and in less than 3 days after Nikola Tesla's property was confiscated by the FBI and handed over to the Office of Alien Custodian, John G. Trump announced to the world that no, there was nothing significant in these files, and that ultimately it did not contain any plans of anything of significant. In fact, I quote, "Tesla's thoughts and efforts during at least the last 15 years were primarily of speculative, philosophical, and somewhat promotional character, often concerned with the production and wireless transmission of power, but did not include new, sound, workable principles or methods for realizing such results." Yet when you look at this declassified document to the director of the FBI, it specifically states that we believe that certain of Tesla's papers may contain basic principles which would be of considerable value to certain ongoing research within the DoD, the Department of Defense. It would be truly helpful to have access to his papers. But besides that, the declassified documents from the FBI literally discuss that although Tesla wrote in English, his penmanship was small, blurred, and so difficult to translate as a foreign language. And in these same documents, in fact, multiple documents state that the FBI did have microfilm. So essentially, they took photos, copies of every single one of Tesla's documents. So when they stated for decades that, no, we don't have Tesla's paperwork, no. Okay, yeah, they didn't have his paperwork, but they had copies of it. So they deliberately manipulated their words in order to convince those that were asking that, no, we don't have anything on him, which was a direct omission of truth, which is interesting. I mean, the FBI, they're officers of the court. And in court, if you omit the truth, well, that's a perjury. That's a felony. But to make everything even more suspicious, out of more than 300 documents that were released by the FBI, a significant amount of them have overwhelming redactions on these papers to the point where you can't even read them. And although most of the papers are just blank and you could read them on your own, an unbelievable amount of them have significant redactions. I mean, look at these Sharpie outs. You can't even read this stuff. Like, what does it say, and why is it being left out 73 years later after his death? But if you want another indicator of dishonest behavior on behalf of the FBI, the very last document they have on Nikola Tesla before he died was back in September of 1940, which was a memo written to the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, suggesting that they put 24/7 or constant surveillance on Nikola Tesla without his knowing in order to prevent him from being kidnapped by the enemy and essentially being tortured for information involving his technologies and inventions. And then after this, there's not a single document for 2.5 years later until his death in 1943. So despite the fact that the FBI has dozens and dozens of correspondence and documentation related to Nikola Tesla before his death, the FBI director gets a suggestion that he put on surveillance on Tesla, and there's nothing after that. Not a yes that set up the surveillance, not a no, not a maybe. Nothing. Do they really expect us to believe that? Does that make any sense? That it wouldn't even warrant a reply whatsoever? I mean, do you believe that? I don't. So here's the part about the CIA. So you might remember 2 days before President Obama left office in January of 2017, he declassified nearly 13 million documents from the CIA, which made headlines all around the world because they discussed various things such as psychic abilities, UFOs, even CIA torture practices on detainees and terrorists. But one thing that was just not mentioned, and I have not seen anything online, internet forums, YouTube, that discussed the fact that Nikola Tesla is also contained in those files. I took it upon myself to literally just type in, and anyone can do this, by the way. Go to CIA.gov, click on the Freedom of Information Act, and type in Nikola Tesla, which is what I did. And I was shocked to see that, yeah, they have several documents on him. Now, besides the fact that there are redactions, blacked out marks, or even more pretty looking white out marks, as you can see here, these documents indicate that they had a secret investigation to Nikola Tesla's sites overseas. They had inventories, they took names, and I mean, who knows what else they left out. But there's clearly missing documents here as well. I mean, where's the documents leading up to this investigation? Where's the documents at the end of the investigation? But here's the one thing that sticks out. So many people were wondering why it took the government 9 years to release Tesla's property to his family. Well, these documents from the CIA indicate that they concluded their investigation in 1952, which just so happens to be the very same year that Nikola Tesla's property was handed back over to his family in Belgrade. Do you really think that that's just a coincidence? So in other words, this explains what they were doing. They were conducting an investigation on who knows what involving his facilities for who knows what reasons. But it shows this, and nobody's aware of this. The CIA, which wasn't even created for 4 years after Tesla died, was conducting an investigation on him in his overseas facilities. Why is that? So when you connect the dots in everything I've discussed, the FBI lying over 7 decades about Nikola Tesla, the fact that they did have copies of his documentation and they manipulated the wording in order to confuse others and essentially tell a lie, the fact that they have all these redactions 73 years after his death, the fact that the CIA was doing a secret investigation on Tesla, and that the government just so happens to release all this documentation on the precise time frame and year that the CIA concluded that investigation. And then you have Nikola Tesla, somebody that's known to have outstanding character, that wanted to help humanity, that died poor and has been shunned by the mainstream and our academics, which is pretty weird, don't you think? When you had all these things together and the fact that he was adamant that he had created the ability, the technology to harness free technology for the entire world, or free energy, I should say, wireless energy, or the death ray and many other things. When you add all these things together and you look at the behavior on behalf of the government, well, guys, what are you left with? It's beyond obvious that there is absolutely a cover-up here. They have some sort of technology of, that Tesla had. I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if you look up what's called the active denial system or the heat gun. I wouldn't be surprised if that's based on Tesla's technology referring to the death ray. Maybe different, obviously. But look, where does it go from here? Bottom line is that the government clearly still has documentation on Tesla. The CIA files and the FBI files both indicate that they have not released everything. I mean, think about it. The FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, receives a memo suggesting they put constant surveillance on him, and then for 2.5 years later, there's not a single shred of correspondence on him altogether? Give me a break. Hopefully there's some up-and-coming, hungry lawyer that's familiar with the Freedom of Information Act that looks over this information and decides to make a name for themselves. Anyways, guys, I'll leave it at that. I'm Jimmy. This is Bright Insight. Like and subscribe and leave me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll also include a link for my other videos on Nikola Tesla as well. Take care, everybody.